Hayley, back to you for the questions.
Thank you very much, Tony. I'm now going to open the floor to all questions. We have had some flooding in so far. Attendees, please do ask lots of questions in the sidebar. You can direct them to a specific person or ask a more general question if you like. I'm also going to unmute all of our presenters now, so they can also jump in on questions if there's anything particularly relevant. The first question came in from Malcolm Sinclair, who says that his organisation has a 99-year lease on a B-listed building. Does the fact that they don't own preclude a land fund application? So I'm going to direct that at Tony first.
Yes, we would expect the project to be looking to acquire the building. That's principally what the lands fund's for. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay,
I missed the start of that, but yeah.
If they were looking to in the future to aspire to own the building, however, that wouldn't preclude them, would it?
No, sorry, Ellie. I think I missed the start of the question.
Oh, sorry.
No,
A long-term
yes.
lease on a.
Do you want me to jump in there? It's Elsa.
Yes.
Yeah,
I can't quite hear you. I'm sorry.
Sorry, the connection is not very good there, probably. Yeah, the Scottish Land Fund is about acquiring the freehold of assets. So if that particular project, you've got a long-term lease and you want to acquire the freehold, then yeah, that's certainly something we could support. The fact that you're already in occupation, have a lease, wouldn't preclude you from applying. But I'd be interested in hearing perhaps from Diane and Pauline and Thomas whether or not a long-term lease would enable access to the funds that you've been talking about.
It's Diane here. For our part, a long-term lease is acceptable. Just give that straightforward answer.
And also from HES, a long-term repairing lease is fine, as is ownership.
Is there a minimum term that either of you would consider?
25 years.
Yes, I'm almost sure it's 25 years for us as well, but it does differ depending on the amount of funding awarded.
Okay, so quite a clear answer there for Malcolm. I've got another question in, specifically directed to the Historic Environment Scotland, so Thomas and Pauline, and that's from Imogen Sawyer, who's saying, thinking of Historic Environment Scotland and the work to the external envelope, could a grant potentially fund items such as replacing UPVC windows with the correct type of windows, where the current windows are not approved and are failing on a B-listed property? So that's quite a specific one.
Yeah, hi, I'll take that. Yes, that could be covered as part of the eligible works. Obviously, what we're looking for is the overall project and the big picture. But yes, replacing those inappropriate windows with traditional timber ones could be considered as part of the funding package.
Excellent. I'm sure Imogen will be delighted about that. We've had a question from Mary, who's talking about the natural environment. If they've got a project that deals primarily with the natural environment, what would be the best source for them to go to funding? So that's quite an open question.
So under the Heritage Grants Programme, we support a wide range of natural heritage projects. One of the projects that I was going to give as an example is Evington Wood, where we supported the purchase and development of that site and ongoing use and delivery of activities there. So yes, we support a wide range of natural heritage projects as well.
Okay, so Mary's first port of call would be his Heritage Lottery Fund. We've got a question in from Jerry Bishop, who's asking if extending a museum built in 1990 to improve the financial sustainability, he's asking if that's a heritage project. Again, I'll open that to Diane, Pauline and Thomas.
Could you just repeat the question, if you don't mind, Hayley?
No problem. So their group work with a museum which was built in 1990. So, and is extending that museum to improve the financial sustainability. Would that classify as a heritage project?
For our purposes, it would. Obviously, we would be asking questions about the collection in the museum. We would want to know if you're working with Museum Galleries Scotland, for instance, and whether you're working towards accreditation and recognised status. But effectively, we would look at it as a museum project or a collection project, and trying to ensure that it is housed and stored in suitable conditions, and made accessible to the public in the way that is a good solution for that collection and in that particular place.
Okay, so it's not. There you go.
From Historic Environment Scotland's perspective, probably not, just on what I've heard. It's because we would be looking for a historic building to be brought back into use, so unfortunately I don't think we'd be able to support that, simply because of the age of the building and the extension.
Okay, so that one would be again a Heritage Lottery direction rather than Historic Environment Scotland. Okay, that's quite a clear answer for them. Sue Savage has come in with a question about how their organisation has a collection of traditional buildings which are of historic importance locally but don't have any formal listings. Would that be a project that would be applicable to either Heritage Lottery Fund or Historic Environment Scotland?
I'll take that one. What we would like to do is have a look at those buildings and see what they're like. There are many reasons why sometimes buildings aren't listed. It could be that the listing inspector just never got there, or they didn't, get above the radar. So the best thing to do would be to send in some details about that. We can also consider buildings for listing. If you think they've been overlooked, you can put a proposal to list the buildings into us, and there are forms online on our website about that.
Okay, doke. Sue actually came in with an addition to her question, where she's saying she has met some barriers in finding funding to restore and convert the buildings because they don't have the listing status, and she's asking for advice on that. It looks like you've given some quite clear advice. Diane, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Just to say that the listed or unlisted status for the buildings isn't a barrier for us. Like Pauline has said, we would look at buildings and the wider sort of historic importance and value of them, and perhaps reasons around why they're not listed. But we would be interested in what the proposal is for them, and the current ownership of them, and I say the proposals going forward.
Okie doke, thank you, Dan. On a similar topic, Emma Galloway has come in with a question on listed status. So she's saying that their building is not listed, and the owner, which happens to be the local council, isn't interested in listing that building. It's their understanding that the Architectural Heritage Fund won't currently fund because it's not listed. Will that change with increased funding available for the communities?
I would need to check that, but I think the Architectural Heritage Fund can fund unlisted buildings in conservation areas, but I think I need to double check that. Similar to ourselves, we can fund unlisted buildings within conservation areas, and again, it may just be that it doesn't meet the criteria for listing, but we could look into that.
Okie doke, so you'd encourage them to get in touch to have a chat about their situation.
Yeah.
Excellent. We've got another kind of situational question here in from Alan Jones. So his group has a mill at risk, but the group is only in the process of setting up their legal entity, so they're nice and early doors. They're hoping that as a new charity to acquire the mill through the Scottish Land Fund, but in the meantime the roof has become badly damaged and the building is deteriorating. Can the group do anything in the interim to almost arrest the damage until they get charitable status?
I think that's a common issue that we hear, and it is difficult to acquire funding simply to stave off long-term decay. Perhaps the best way to do that is to do some campaigning and some local fundraising to just get enough money to do some short-term repairs to prevent things from getting worse in the long term. But unfortunately, we aren't able to fund emergency repairs, we need to know that there is a project there and that our investment is going to be secure for the long term. Because if a building receives emergency funding, there's no guarantees at that stage that it's going to go ahead and be a sustainable project.
Okay, quite a clear answer there. Anyone else want to jump in on that?
I guess just to confirm that. Sorry, go on ahead, Elsa.
Oh no, I was just going to say, Diane, that from a Scottish Land Fund point of view, really the sort of purpose of the webinar today is to say that it'd be difficult for us to support an application for a project where the building is in really poor condition, and it does require substantial development work to bring it back into good repair and deliver some of the outcomes that the community is looking for. So unless you've had those conversations with HLF, HES, and other funders at quite an early stage to develop a project as to what you're going to use the building for, it's unlikely that it's something we could support through Scottish Land Fund.
Yeah, Dan?
I'm just trying to remember what I was going to say. Oh yes, it was just going to confirm, I think similar to Pauline, that yeah, unfortunately we don't have funding available for emergency works where a community organisation that's intending to be set up, but they don't yet own the building. So yes, it would be local fundraising, I'm afraid.
Okie doke, thank you all. Ewan Scott has come in with a question about a cemetery wall. Their cemetery has war graves in it, and they're looking to repair the cemetery wall to prevent damage from cattle. What programme would you suggest they would go towards? Perhaps the Parks for People programme?
It could possibly be Parks for People. Certainly we do fund cemeteries under that programme. It would depend on the scale of the work that's required. That programme is for grants from £100,000 upwards. So if it was something more modest that was required, then you might want to look at the Art Heritage programme, which funds grants from £10,000 to £100,000. It would need to, for either of those programmes, the project would need to be a proposal for more than just repairing the wall. As I say, it needs to be achieving across the three sort of groups of outcomes for heritage, people and communities. So there would need to be proposals around engaging people and helping them to understand the heritage.
Okay, doke. We've got a question in from John, who is asking, are church-owned buildings used principally for worship but occasionally community use eligible? Does it make any difference if the applicant is the Corporate Church of Scotland or the local presbytery, if I've pronounced that correctly? And I think that's open to the whole panel.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether Thomas or Pauline are going to go into that. So we have a specific programme, Grants for Places of Worship, or places of worship that are in regular use. Occasional community use certainly doesn't preclude them from applying under that programme. In fact, it's a good thing, I would say. And that programme supports high-level structural repairs, making those buildings wind and watertight. And yeah, those applications come from Church of Scotland and other denominations across the country. So that's the programme to look to, and that's programme is a shared programme between ourselves and Historic Environment Scotland.
I'd just jump in at that point and just say absolutely, this programme is specifically designed for places of worship and does show closer collaboration between the Heritage Lottery Fund and Historic Environment Scotland than many of our other programmes, to the point where we share an assessment process on this. So a successful applicant, although they will still have separate contracts from the different organisations, because as I stated earlier, we are separate organisations. We will have gone. That application will have gone through a shared application process, which is really useful from our point of view.
And just to point out some of the differences between ourselves and Architectural Heritage Fund, places of worship or buildings in religious use are not eligible for Architectural Heritage Fund grant unless they have come out of that use and are then going to be in community use. Equally, the Architectural Heritage Fund doesn't fund local authorities either.
Okay, so there's lots of options depending on what they intend the future of the building to be. That's good news. We've got another all-panel question from Tom Hunter, who's saying that his group, they've got a down payment on historic property to secure the title and are now the legal owners, but they need to make up the shortfall within 5 years to secure that and to enable restoration. Is there any funding available for this from you? And that's to the whole panel.
Well, if I start off perhaps with the acquisition side, if you were already the freehold owner of the property, then you wouldn't be able to come to Scottish Land Fund for it. But if what you've got at the moment is an option over it and almost a right to buy it, subject to you raising the funds, then yeah, that is something that we could look at, and I'd suggest you speak to either Tony or myself, and we can talk that through in a bit more detail. But as I say, the Scottish Land Fund is all about transferring freehold ownership into community use. So if you own it already, then it's not something that we could support. So I'll pass over to their colleagues, but from there on, it sounds like a reasonably straightforward restoration project.
Hi, yeah, Thomas Knowles here from Historic Environment Scotland. Hi, Tom. Thanks very much for bringing this question up. I really appreciate it. Historic Environment Scotland do run something called an acquisition fund. Very, very rarely used. In fact, I have no recollection of it ever being appropriately used. But we are in a position to, on occasion, offer funding towards acquisition of historic buildings. There are some caveats, obviously, within that. Primarily, that the value is set by the district valuer, and our grant would max out at 50% of that value. I would recommend, Tom, if you've got any specific queries about this, that you get in touch with us direct, and we can talk about it in more detail offline. Thanks very much.
Excellent. That's me actually at the end of the question list from everyone, unless someone manages to sneak one in whilst I'm speaking, as someone just has, which is, again, it's on the topic of places of worship. So we've talked about churches that are already within a denomination. This question is open to the whole panel. What is the position on a disused church which is being restored to a place of worship and a tourist centre? Lots of scratching of heads on that one.
I think it might depend on what we might consider the primary use to be, whether it's the majority of the use is tourism, community, but not quite sure with the level of detail, I'm afraid, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there's relatively straightforward parameters for the places of worship programme, but essentially if the project doesn't fit that, because they are quite straightforward in terms of the level of use as a place of worship, etc., then it would be redirecting to the general sort of heritage grants programme for us, and the project could come under that and compete.
Okay, so that's not a no to the person who asked the question, but it's we need more detail on that one. Okay, if there's any last minute questions, please get them in now or forever hold your peace. And I think to reiterate what all the speakers have said, all of the funders are speaking together, so to make sure to get in contact, and they're all relatively friendly people, so please do get in contact with them if you've got any questions. And as there are no last minute questions coming in, all there is left to do is to thank all of the presenters. They've given up some of their time from across the country to present here today. So thank you very much to all of you, and I'm going to sign off now.
Thank you.
Enjoy your pancake day, everyone.